Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week, in continuing the trend of spooky horror movies for October, I watched Train to Busan from 2016. Train to Busan is a Korean horror action drama film. Kind of hard to put a finger directly on it. It's a combination of things. It's also a zombie film. That alone is kind of what put me off watching it for a while. The movie had been recommended to me not long after it came out, I want to say, probably, maybe a year after it came out. It was generally well liked, although I don't know that it got much of an international release. I'm actually not sure it even came out outside of South Korea. But it circulated, as is the new international media landscape. It was distributed in some form or another and got a bit of a following and a lot of appreciation. And I have to say, I think a lot of it is well deserved. I don't really read other people's reviews all that much. I like to go into things I care about with a pretty blank slate. So I didn't have too much of a preconceived notion about it, other than it was South Korean and related to this train, and that it was a zombie movie. And sort of, I didn't write it off, but I sort of didn't want to watch a zombie movie more than anything else. It's funny because last week I also watched a zombie movie, but we've talked about zombie movies on this series quite a bit now, since early video on Dawn of the Dead and talking in more detail about zombies there. I mean, zombies are a fascinating literary tool when used right. And when they aren't, they're just a shitty monster. And over the last 10 years, certainly 15 years more accurately, zombie movies have really, like, everybody and their mother made a zombie movie, and most of them are bad and don't use the zombies as anything other than a nebulous threat. As I talked about before, not really a big fan of that. Don't really just want to watch a monster movie. Kind of boring. So I was very pleasantly surprised. Well, not surprised, but I was pleased by this, because not only does it do some actual proper work with zombies to make them, to use them in a metaphorical literary sense, but also to do its own thing a little bit. The zombies are not the same zombies you've seen in any other franchise. And I'm going to pivot off of that right into the acting. Oh, well, actually, before I get into the acting, I do want to make a note. This is in Korean. Last week's was in Japanese. Whenever I watch I watch a lot of international films. Whenever I watch an international film, I watch it in the native language. I will never watch a dub unless I am absolutely forced to. I have never met a dub that I liked. Well, that's not true. There are a few dubs that I like, but mostly because they're exceedingly terrible. Like, what's that series? Ghost Stories. That dub is fantastic, and that's because they don't do any. Anyway, I digress. I never watched the dub. It never properly dubs never properly capture the emotion of the actor on screen. It's never right. It always takes me out of my immersion. I have no interest in seeing that. I'm very used to reading subtitles. It's fine. So, with that behind us, I want to talk about the acting. All of the actors in this are great. not all the characters are that, in fact, I would say none of the characters are that nuanced or deep or like really detailed. But the actors do a great job of playing exactly how they're supposed to play, get their certain aspects of them across to serve the plot. And there is some definitely good acting in there. But on the whole, nobody stands out as like, nobody stands out as truly extraordinary, but there's some good stuff in there. What I do want to talk about, besides just, standing and, standing and talking and emoting and those sorts of things, is the physicality of this film. I'm going to do this in a way that I don't think is in any way a spoiler. This film really runs the gamut in terms of its tones and what various scenes are like. There's talking scenes, there's running scenes, there's fight scenes, there's all these there's different kinds of things. And all of the actors do an excellent job in their physical acting. Whether that is conveying a certain emotion with their body, with their physical reactions to the things that are happening, and the way they express themselves in their physicality and their facial features. But even more so is during scenes that are more active. Not only is everybody there seem to be quite capable of handling themselves in a physical scene. I didn't notice any shots that seemed to be obviously of stunt people being swapped in for the main actors. There's a lot of, we'll get into the cinematography in a moment. So all of the actors seem to be doing most, if not all, of their own stunts. And in addition to that, the zombie actors are extraordinary. I mean, all of them. Most of the time in a zombie film, anything with anything more than a couple of zombies, you easily see in any crowd of any size, like a whole bunch of zombies just not doing zombie shit, or not acting, or just sort of, not having they're not really doing anything. They're not playing their zombie character. In this, every zombie actor I saw was doing something that was extremely specifically directed. Even when they are idle, there is a reason for the way that they are idling. And in addition, during chases and fights, the physical acting done in there, some of it is really extraordinary. Like contortionist stuff and just extremely unnatural movement that, as far as I can tell, is not done in post-processing. It was done by the people acting the zombies. There's some really, really great stuff. That said, it does bring me to one of the things I am a little bit not such a fan of. There are CG is used sparingly in this film, and some of it is extremely well done, and some of it isn't. Especially in cases where, no, I can't even point to specific things they do well and they don't do well, because it's not like all of the environmental effects are weird, or all of the, big scenes with many characters are weird. It's really just it seems very random, hit and miss. I wish they had the budget to clean some of those things up a little more, or maybe just choose not to show certain things. But at the same time, there are a couple of moments of really extraordinary CG that are done to really good effect. on the flip side of that, there are a bunch of really, really good practical effects that a few of them might be CG, but I don't believe they are. I believe they're completely practical. And man, some of those are nuts. It's a combination of like both really good stunt coordination and some really inventive design, like choreography design, basically, where you just like, oh, I've never seen a zombie or zombies do that before. That's so cool. That's so interesting. That's different. And like, it's not going like wildly out there. These aren't like a whole different kind of zombie or anything like that, but it's just enough, and they're directed in such deliberate ways that it really, it's visually stimulating. I'm not just watching another scene with a bunch of zombies in it from any movie. It's pretty great. There are some scenes that are a little bit more, it's a little bit there's too much convenience written into certain scenes. Elements that are just like, that wouldn't really be how that went. This is really just for convenience. But I was so engaged in so much of it that like those thoughts as they cropped up were quickly swept away. Cause even when it's like, this is kind of forced, it's still got good reason to exist, and it's still extremely engaging. And I really appreciated that. As far as the like fight scenes, action scenes, chases, these other things, cinematography overall is extremely good. They do a very good job of, it's a pretty active camera. It's a lot of handheld. There's some crane shots and sweeping shots and things like that, and long dolly shots that are really well done, and avoid a lot of the typical pitfalls of Hollywood in the last 2 decades. Not too much excessive cutting or things like that, but there are some good like dynamic cuts as well as some dynamic camera work on handheld to give you a sense of pacing, a sense of urgency and motion. That's really, really well executed. One of the things that's fascinating about this is that, well, okay, I got to talk about 2 things here. Most of a substantial portion of the film is on a train in Korea, which means it's a proper train, not a fucking American train, which is kind of interesting because this is a movie that doesn't really work in the US, or at least I don't think would, because the United States does not have much of a train system. Whereas much of Korea, Japan, Europe in general, like much of the world has really makes really broad use of trains. For some reason, I guess North America in general is just sort of lacking, but the United States in particular just does not, like, our Amtrak is a joke for the most part, at least relative to anybody else. And so it is a setting that I don't see being that comprehensible to audiences in the US who haven't experienced the types of trains that are available in other places. I'm not saying they wouldn't get it or anything like that. It's just I don't think it hits the same if you've never been on like a high-speed train before. But I don't know. I've been on a few, so it's it makes more sense to me. There's a lot of like, they don't explain the train, and that's sort of something I would expect U.S. audiences to demand. To that point, though, they're making a remake. There's somebody in Hollywood is making a US remake of Train to Busan. I have no interest in watching it. I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know if they're setting it in Korea or elsewhere. It seems entirely bizarre to me why Hollywood persists in remaking within a few years movies that are extremely successful outside the United States in the hopes that they can just cash in on it again, but by making it worse for an American audience. It's almost always mediocre to bad. There are a few exceptions, but stop doing this. Anyway, I digress. The overall, the story and the thing that it's trying to tell that's kind of, well, okay, how do I talk about this? This is very much in a more classical vein, a Romero-esque vein of social commentary as framed within zombies. There are certainly aspects of this film that are much more like modern Hollywood type in terms of like pacing to keep a modern audience engaged. It's less contemplative than a Romero film. But there's still quite a lot of, at some points, heavy-handed commentary as to social and ethical issues and cultural issues that are, relevant. That I think it's very much in keeping with, Romero's interest in making zombies a vehicle for social commentary. And I really think that was executed pretty well in this film. It can be certainly heavy-handed at times. It has moments of excessive drama or melodrama or, like, as I mentioned before, scenes or transitions that are mostly there to just sort of push their specific idea or message forward, but none of them are particularly egregious. There's a little bit about the ending of the film that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I don't need to talk about that here. We're staying spoiler free. I think it sort of makes a slight, detour towards the end of the film that feels a little bit forced. That said, it still worked. It still worked on me quite well. I don't hate it. I feel like I should be more upset about it, but I don't. It's well executed. So yeah. Anyway, a whole bunch of, pertinent modern social commentary that I really appreciated. And it's not just, Korean specific, like there are cultural aspects that are particularly Korean, but like the messages are pretty universal about, aspects of modernity. And I think it was well done. Anyway, I could have sworn I had something else I wanted to talk about. Side note, I think the soundtrack is quite good for this. It avoids a lot of the common Hollywood pitfalls when it comes to movie soundtracks, especially for for action scenes. Hollywood just loves to absolutely blast your ears with as many decibels as possible during action scenes. And this movie does not do that in the least. Really appreciated. It's not like compositions that are so incredible I want to listen to them, just while I'm doing chores or whatever, but they're quite good. They work really well, and I appreciated how they augmented the film. Anyway, there's also a sequel that was already made to this film, I think last year. I also have no interest in watching that, even though it is another Korean film, not an American remake. Yeah, I think this one bundles up quite nicely. Works really well. Doesn't need a sequel. Yeah. So if you're in the mood for a zombie film that doesn't suck, here you go. It's quite good. And if you don't like subtitles, stop watching this channel, because I don't know what you're complaining about. It's dumb. Read the subtitles. It's fine. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode. I've been the Social Solipsist. I will see you guys next time.